Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this panel. I'm really honored to host it tonight. And thank you to the filmmakers for telling this story and capturing all the tears and the boogers and the dildos flinging across the screen. It's been just a delight. When I was given this opportunity to host a social impact series of events, I asked myself, what was the most thoughtful way that I could use this opportunity to do good, right? Like, I don't want to gather people to circle jerk or preach to the choir. I really want to make sure that action and good things come out of these panels. And so I asked myself, well, there's an election coming up. So the first panel I did, we got out the vote. We did stuff with 18 Million Rising, which is an Asian American advocacy group, and Move Texas, which is a youth voter group in Texas. And then when I was like, okay, there's another one about 2 weeks before the election, what do we do? I wanted to emotionally prepare people for whatever the future may be, but also start to mentally prepare everyone to think about what are some sustainable strategies politically that people can cling on to and continue to support beyond the election. Elections aren't everything, they happen sporadically. And I don't want people's attention or care or action to wane in between these. So I asked myself, who should I bring on? And I immediately thought of Amber Goodwin. Amber is the founder and executive director of the Community Justice Action Fund. That is a Black-led nonprofit building power to end gun violence by leading from folks who are the most impacted. And so I can't wait for Amber to tell you more about that organization. Another panelist is Laura Molinar. She is the founder of Sueños sin Fronteras de Tejas. It's a Latinx women of color led collective providing health and healing support and access to immigrant women and children across the US. These are activists who I learn from every single day, whose ideas have challenged me and helped me grow. And I hope that we can continue to support them and learn from them. So I'm glad to have them on. Thank you for coming here. One at a time, would y'all introduce yourselves? Because I just gave, the website blurb. Technically, Amber, I fumbled yours a little because I thought I knew it too well. But yeah, Amber, how about you go first, and then tell us a little bit about your organization and why you started it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jessica. I am so proud of you and incredibly proud to be on this panel and to learn from the other panelists of the incredible work that's happening across Texas that will hopefully change the entire country. And before I get started on telling a little bit about myself and my organization, I want to just say the names of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Mercy Mack, and thinking about the 575 babies that don't have parents. So there's so much going on in the world right now. And I know that we are having a conversation about, preventing violence and also issues that are important to us. But there's also people that are in a lot of pain right now because of the injustices in this country. And I think that this panel is even more important right now because I think really talking about the intersectionality of issues that are happening here in Texas, that are probably happening in other places, is really important to me personally, but I know to so many others that are probably listening right now. So I grew up in Midland, Texas, which I tell people all the time, if you are under the age of 30, it's where Friday Night Lights, the show, was. And if you're over the age of 30, it's where baby Jessica fell down the well. And so I'm over the age of 30. And so I am from a small town in Texas, was born and raised in Texas, and lived all over the country after college, and didn't really ever think that I would get involved in an issue like gun violence. Even though I was from Texas, I was never around guns. And so it wasn't an issue that I really thought about. I started working for a national advocacy organization that was really focused on the broad issue of gun violence and mass shootings. It was an organization that was started after a mass shooting of mostly white people. And although I had an incredible time and got to meet so many great advocates, including Jessica, I always knew that there had to be some sort of specific way that we could impact communities of color, and specifically the Black community. Jessica and I got into numerous fights with people within the advocacy organizations that actually did not want to say Black Lives Matter. They just didn't want to say it out loud. And this was 5 or 6 years ago. So, and I promise I'll be quick, but that's my story really started on how I got involved with gun violence, is because, similar to Jessica, I got really pissed off that people that had a lot of access to money and resources we're continuing to talk only about mass shootings, but weren't talking about the everyday gun violence that's happening in Houston, that's happening in South Texas, that's happening in Dallas. So started this organization to center people of color, Indigenous folks across the country. And I think what has been most important over the last 5 years is that we center the people who are closest to the pain to make the decisions and help have the self-determination to decide how to create community safety. And so I know we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we focus on policy, we focus on organizing. We're doing a ton of electoral work right now that we're really proud of, but it's all being led by people who are directly impacted by the issue of gun violence. So, and I am here in Houston, Texas, the home of Beyonce and Megan Thee Stallion. So that is where I'm home based right now.
Thank you. What's up, Laura?
Hey, Jessica. Yes, I just, my name is Laura Molinar, and I just am so inspired by Jessica and Amber, and it's an honor to be on this panel. Super excited to be here. And I'm coming from, or I'm based out of San Antonio, where I was born and raised, and I identify as Mexican American, Tejana, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Sueños sin Fronteras de Tejas here in San Antonio. And yeah, I'm also a social work student, trying to be a social work student. I'm not doing a very good job at it, but so yeah, and just really honored to be here. My collective Sueños sin Fronteras, we are a Latinx-led collective focused on healing and reproductive justice for immigrant women and children in South Texas and across the United States. We were originally founded in June of 2018 during the height of family separations at the border, and just saw the need for health access and liberation for this community, this beautiful community. We work from a reproductive justice lens to address barriers and access to healthcare, social services, healing modalities for immigrant women and their families. And our work is largely inspired by Loretta Ross and a caucus of Black feminists' vision for reproductive justice, which was realized at a pro-choice conference in 1994. And so our programs with Sueños sin Fronteras, which include our Empowerment Mutual Aid Fund, which was launched at the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, our Act of Solidarity Commissary Fund, which provides phone saldo and commissary funds to families that are currently detained at Karnes County Detention Center, or Karnes Baby Jail, as we like to call it, in Karnes County, Texas. And also we have our Health Advocate Project that is focused on reproductive health, education, and access for immigrant women and their families. And then we are also working on our Resource Development Project, which aims to connect the community to accessible resources that they need. And our programs, they aim to increase accessibility to services and enact structural changes that lead to the abolishment of systems that perpetuate the carceral state.
Oh boy, that's a lot of work, y'all. And it's really heartbreaking, and I don't like it's a feat that you are here able to speak on it and aren't just recovering with an ice pack on your head every day from like the emotional labor of the work that both of you do. You guys do a lot of work on the ground with communities that are extremely impacted. And a lot of those things come from the fact that these are downstream or even direct effects of policies that have harmed Black and Brown communities. And a lot of these policies were written by Democrats right? Everyone that I know right now is probably out hustling, trying to get the boat out, trying to make the playing ground a little bit more friendly, but the playing ground itself is like what you like, even like other models of this playing ground are what you guys have to build your work on. So my next question, and by the way, for the audience, there's a Q&A box too that I'd love you to drop questions in, just to let you know in this Zoom. But my next question is, how do you view your relationship with electoral politics, and to what degree should we rely on them for the big structural changes we need for true justice? Does anyone want to jump in on that big philosophical question?
I mean, I'll go. I started working on the Hill was my first job, and I was just I was like, I was in LA, like going at the Oscars or something, going around Congress. I was like, this is so cool. Also, I'm just a nerd. And so I was like, this is so great. Everyone here is going to save us. I will write policy and it's going to change the world. And I thought that for probably the first 15 years that I worked in politics. I worked to get Obama elected, which he's still such a hero of mine. I worked on Obamacare. I worked to get Obamacare implemented. And then when I started working on these issues that, again, are so intersectional, but so personal and so wrapped in the history of this country, we can't have a conversation about violence or reproductive rights or anything like that unless we talk about how the systems were built to oppress people who look like all of us. We can't have the conversation. And that wasn't happening for so long. We were fighting up against systems that were not built to actually protect us. And so when we would say criminal justice reform, we need it, it's like, well, do we want to reform something that's actually not working for us? And so those were conversations that a lot of people were not ready for until, I would say, very, very recently, when we started talking about reform. And for us as an organization, and I'd love to get Laura's opinion on how she kind of works on this, but like, we're not trying to reform these systems, right? Because they're not working for us. And so we got to start over. I'm a law student right now too. And I know for a fact that these systems and these laws were put into place to actually harm our communities. And so specifically on the issue of gun violence, for so long, we only focused in policies on the hardware. It was just focused on, do I have access to guns, or does this person not have access to guns? It wasn't actually focusing on how guns are coming in and out of our communities, whether or not how people are being impacted disproportionately. And when you look at the sheer numbers of the 40,000 people who die every single year by gun violence, a disproportionate number, around 2/3 of the homicides, are all Black people. And when you look at domestic violence, it's women of color, it's Latinx women, it's Black women that are at some cities in the state of Texas 10 times more likely to be shot and killed by their domestic abuser. And there's no recourse that doesn't require law enforcement to actually get those guns out of our communities. And so what we've been trying to do on the policies is make sure that we're making the demands of our community leaders, but we've got to build power first to be able to make sure that we can hold people accountable. I couldn't say this in my 20s and 30s. I would have never said, so-and-so won't save us. I was always like, that elected official will save us. And now I'm like, no, they won't. We got to run against them next time. We need a young person to run against them. And so I absolutely think that there are a lot of policymakers out there, like AOC and a lot of other ones on the local level, who are really fighting every single day and are true freedom fighters. We got to have everybody. We need to have people inside the system. We got to have all of us outside the system too. And so, I think that us as advocates, especially in the state of Texas, our ancestors were either brought here or we were already here before all this mess got here, right? And so this is our state, and that's how we think about it in terms of what policies we want. This is our ground. We built this state, we built this country, and so we are actually, in your words, Jessica, taking it back. Like, we built the state. Many of my friends are 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th generation Texans, and so I think we feel more empowered as we're building that power, that people shouldn't feel like, oh, no, the laws that are on the books, we should just implement those. It's like, no, we got to start over, and we got time and we got resources, and we just need to demand them. So that's how we kind of think of things. I'm a little bit more radical than some people, but I think we got to, if we want to believe about another world. So
I don't want to jump in.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Amber said. I was like trying to not like nod my head obnoxiously, but I really appreciate everything she just said. And to answer, the short answer to that question is no. We should not solely rely on them for structural change and true social justice. Like Amber said, we need to recreate these systems for a better future. And, you know, personally, I feel that it's a bit reckless to completely place your faith in a system built on racism and intentionally, and also that it was intentionally created to protect and preserve the power of Southern states. And so, you know, the Electoral College being created to maintain slavery in the South continues to disenfranchise communities of color to this day. And so that's why I feel like it should be abolished and we need to recreate a new system. But with this said, I know that, you know, knowing that the Electoral College needs to be abolished and a Biden-Harris administration will not immediately solve all of our problems, but we cannot have another Trump administration because it will severely affect communities of color, specifically immigrant communities here in South Texas that are already struggling to just survive. And, you know, that's why I'm just encouraging everyone to vote because it is to the detriment of our communities.
Can I also just say one thing to that point of the like incredible work that Laura is doing? There's no, and I didn't make this quote up, but there is no such thing as somebody else's child. Those are our babies that don't have parents. Those are children of all of us. We are all wrapped up in everybody's freedom. And when those kids were in cages or their families were in cages or they're disconnected from their families, that's all of our problem. It's not just people who are Latinx or people who are immigrants. That's everybody's problem. And I think that is one of the things, it's not a highlight of the last 4 years, but if nothing else, people need to understand that our freedom and our liberation is connected with each other. And if we don't get that right, this election cycle, we're going to be back we're already going to be back for 100 years from just trying to fix what happened over the last 4 years, but we won't be able to recover if we have another 4 years of what we just had. We just won't as a society.
Absolutely.
One thing that I think is so striking about the work that both of you do is that it's so rooted in care. It's something that's like refreshing because it's so missing in the way that we typically approach problem solving. And people usually don't think that care is policy, right? They're just like, it's laws, it's police, it's rules, but like care is political power, building caring communities, building structures of care are all things that are political and they are political power. And yeah, I would just love to hear more thoughts on that. It's something that's new to me, right? It's like this more nurturing way of bringing change about that like you don't see very often.
I love that you said that, Jessica, because it is about care and the power of community care. I just feel like it's underestimated. You know, being at the Tejana and third generation Mexican, my ancestors were also indigenous to Texas. And, you know, being born and raised in South Texas, I have witnessed racism and discrimination towards people of color, in Texas, and often by fellow Tejanos and Latinos. And this is mind-blowing until you realize that racist immigration enforcement policies in Texas highlight deepened racial divisions that have been perpetuated by centuries of militarization at the US-Mexico border. And this is why this work is like so important to us, especially being in Texas, because the opportunity that we have to channel movements like Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives and frameworks like reproductive justice, transformative justice, that challenges racist, xenophobic government structures that perpetuate this marginalization of immigrant communities in Texas. But I also want to point out that that's not our main focus. Our collective power comes from resilience, centuries and centuries of resilience, perseverance, self-determination, of our ancestors and of the immigrant women and families that we work with. Our political power is rooted in empowering the communities we serve to support each other. Like Amber said, like our liberation is bound to each other. And this is a practice that our ancestors have been doing for generations. It is integral to who we are. I'm getting chills just saying that. And building sustainability doesn't just call for closing the loopholes and changing policies. It requires us to use self-determination and solidarity to envision the future that we want for our communities. And whether, like in our work with Sueños, whether that's providing commissary funds or phone minutes to a family in detention, or rental support for a woman recently released from ICE detention, or a referral for a woman to receive free reproductive health services. All of these practices are interconnected and they restore autonomy and build that sustainability.
Yeah, I'll just add ditto to everything Lada said. And then, we're as an organization we're not the first line, because we talk a lot about first responders in dealing with crisis, whether it's police or whether it's EMS. And if there was something before a first responder, that would be the people, the healers, and a lot of people in our communities that go to the scene when there's beef, when there's gun violence about to happen, to try and stop the beef from happening, or that will actually put their bodies in between harm's way to make us safe. And so there are actually people probably in every major city and even smaller cities in Texas, but across the country, especially in bigger cities, that are credible messengers, that are people who are working with hospital systems, that are working with Indigenous healers, who go to the scene where there is conflict, and they find different ways that don't involve guns, or they are able to de-escalate when people do have guns, in a way to really see, make communities really see how our connected humanity. It's really hard. The healing work, I think, is something that the gun violence prevention movement, the people of color who work on gun violence, we don't do enough. There are lots of systems and practices that I know organizations based out of New York and other states use really well, where they actually do have those healers who come almost every time there's a conflict. But I think it's a practice that I know I personally need to get better at, and that a lot of us need to get back to, because I think we're always running, and so we don't give ourselves a chance to heal. And I even think about that with the way that the media portrays, especially Black people in this country, is a form of violence. Like every time that I have to get on I watch TV, or I get on the internet and there's a Black body that's displayed, or a mugshot or something else of an innocent person who was shot and killed, it's a form of violence. And we haven't gotten to really the root of how violent people of color in this country are treated when it comes to telling our stories, which I think is so important and critical, Jessica, about what you did, and this whole the whole story, to really authentically be yourself, the Jessica that we all quickly learned to love as soon as we met you. But that it was authentic, but it also was personal, and also something that was impactful. And so I think that's incredibly important, because I think the last thing I'll say is that a lot of people, and especially in activism, to get a lot of funding and get a lot of support, you have to act a certain way. You have to be like all buttoned up and like, say certain buzzwords, and like, that's not me, or the folks that I know I rock with. But it's part of the kind of activism where people are like, well, if you weren't on the cover of Time magazine, then who are you? And it's like, well, there's all these people who are doing work in states like Texas. And before we got on here, we were talking about how important the state of Texas is. And 10, 15 years ago, nobody would have cared about your vote in Texas for so many different reasons. And so it's not because of one political candidate, it's because of the deep organizing work that's happened that people feel empowered to vote, or to just organize year round in the state of Texas.
Thank you all. It gives me so much hope to think about the fact that y'all are doing so much work on the ground to build sustainable, caring work that is kind of, it's like stepping on, it's like it's not totally dependent on elections. It is leading from impacted people. It is leading from the people. It is lifting up the stories of people who are actually affected by these policies and leading from there. We had one panelist who wasn't able to make it tonight. This was Crystal Two Bulls from NDN Collective. And Crystal is the director of a campaign called Land Back, which NDN launched on Indigenous Peoples Day last week. It was inspired by I just want to drop this and then I actually have a relevant question for both of you. This campaign sprung off the fact that Mount Rushmore is built on stolen land in the Dakotas. It was the US federal government violated a treaty, snatched that land that wasn't supposed to be theirs, and built an insulting monument to white supremacy on it. So when Trump went to go speak there on July 4th, a bunch of land protectors went there and said, you're not welcome here. This is our land and you're not supposed to be here. And everyone got arrested. So they launched a campaign called Land Back. It's a movement that has existed for generations with a long legacy of organizing and sacrifice to bring Indigenous lands back into Indigenous hands. And when the founder or I think just the president and CEO of NDN was arrested at that protest, he was held for 3 days in jail. And when he came out, he gave this incredible statement. And one thing that he said that I've been thinking about ever since I read it was, he says, I can already think of the journalist in my head saying, well, can Indians really manage that land if they got it back? And the first thing I would like to say is that some of the biggest land managers in the entire United States right now is Indigenous people. Indigenous people manage, I think, well over 50 million acres currently. And Mount Rushmore is just a little bit of that. Not to mention, that's just in modern times. We've been stewards of land for thousands of years, so damn right, we can manage that land. And I'm thinking about the work that you two do and the questions that you must get as women of color leading movements, as women of color who are bringing a new approach to their work. Like, what is the most common newbie critique doubt that you hear when you're presenting them with your tactics and your strategy and your community-led strategies? Like, what are the haters saying and how do you respond to them? Amber, you cracked a big smile there. Let's go.
I mean, I wish I knew this ahead of time. I would have brought up just screenshot after screenshot of everything everyone has said about me. I think for the first couple of years, I've been doing this particular job for almost 5 years and in the movement for many years before that. People did not want to empower, or as Lauda said, give the self-determination of what we want as people to a Black woman. I was called aggressive. I was called every cuss word in the book. I also was called a bully by people who said that I was a bully for Black people. And I was like, can I put that on a t-shirt, or can I put it on my business card? People thought that. I think the biggest criticism that I've gotten is that I fight too aggressively for our communities. And I'm not saying that as a check mark or a gold star for myself, but as in, Amber, why are you always talking about Black people? Before BLM and before, especially this year, so many people would ask me, especially on the issue of gun violence, I was called a reverse racist because I wanted to talk about Black lives. I was called every name in the book because an example of kind of your first question that you asked us about policies, there was a background check bill that was going to be passed, HR 8 a year ago, and it was going to be the first time this bill was passed through the House. A gun violence bill was passed in decades, I think, and the Democrats got it passed, and then whenever it was going to go to the Senate, when the Democrats were trying to pass it, somehow bipartisan wide, both sides decided to put a rider on it that included ICE in the equation. And so because they wanted this gun violence prevention bill to get passed, they were willing to sell out immigrants and include ICE in a place that it wasn't supposed to be. And so when I said, we cannot support this bill, people said, we've been waiting for decades to get this background check bill. And I said, you can wait more decades. We're not supporting ICE. We need to abolish ICE. So why would we give them another tool in their toolbox? But that was a year and a half ago where people were like, no, it's fine. Just let ICE come in and take people away, right? And so I think people have just said, and again, I think this is a women of color thing. I'm aggressive, all those types of things. But I do think that no one would say that I don't fight hard every single day for our communities, and that I am actually, I think in a way that hopefully is helpful to not just Black people, but like as we talked about before, our entire liberation as people of color. And so, I just think it's people don't like women who speak up for ourselves, and definitely don't like people who don't want to go kind of with the mainstream. And so whenever I left a larger organization, white-led organization, to start my own, I think that people didn't necessarily like that at the beginning, but they quickly got over it. Just took a couple of years. So.
It's incredible that a lot of that criticism comes from people who are supposed to be on your side. Right. If we're going to talk, like, if we're saying that like there's a divide and there's one people on one side and one another, like a lot of the most heartbreaking crap that you get as an activist are people who are supposed to be supporting you, or once supported you, or once tokenized you. Yeah. One way or another. Like if you start to break out on your own, it gets messy, and there's a bit of that in this film.
Yeah, Lotta, do you? Yeah. Also that I want to, and I'm not just saying this because we're on here together. I couldn't have made it out. I could not have done this without your support, though, Jessica. I know it is like, you probably don't think it was that big of a deal, but Jessica was always in my corner. And at first I thought it was because I was a Texan and there weren't a lot of us who were doing this work. But as soon as Jessica was like, oh, there's another woman, we're going to work together on different things, you always had my back. For every single thing, no matter how little, no matter how big. And so it's incredibly important that you know that your support means so much to people, because a lot of us were hung out to dry for so long in the gun violence prevention movement. And I knew I could always tag you into stuff on Facebook and you'd take on that fight and that burden for me every single time. And so it meant a lot that I didn't have to carry the burden myself while I was doing this work. So I just want to also thank you for that too.
Oh my God, thank you. Like I love to pick a Facebook fight. Tag me in anytime, especially with like obnoxious gun people. Happy to do it. And also they were treating me like such a darling for a while that I had a little bit more runway to like wring out that credibility that they handed me very much at the beginning. Lotta, do you get crap from folks in the immigration community that are like, why are you handing out diapers? We're doing other stuff. Like, don't, like what do you hear from folks, either from your side or just from brand new people? Like what's the word?
Yeah. So, I have to say that at first it was like complete silence because we were not even recognized. We were constantly being ignored, questioned, whenever there was, trying to advocate for our place, at the table. Like it just wasn't possible, honestly, because, we were just, people just didn't even give us a second glance. And, I think that this is it's unfortunately like, I don't want to say common because it shouldn't be common. But this is a challenge that, Latinx, people of color led organizations in South Texas often, or in Texas in general, often encounter. And, it has never been easy and it never will be easy, but that is why we're here. And so since our founding, we have only been an organization for 2.5 years, but we have had to navigate the nonprofit industrial complex, and also religious humanitarian organizations that often perpetuate the white savior complex, homophobia, shame. I was raised Catholic, and so I'm very familiar with some of these tactics that they use sometimes. And I still, it's like I have a lot of respect and reverence for some of the religious organizations that we do work with, but then on that same note, we have experienced a lot of scrutiny from them. And to give you an example, just recently we were told by a local religious organization in San Antonio that they didn't want to work with us because of our focus on reproductive health. and justice, and that we provide abortions. And so, yeah, that it, and so people, especially religious organizations, when they hear reproductive justice, they automatically, go to abortion, and that is a part, an important part of reproductive justice, but that's not everything. And we will never apologize or back down from this, because we know that our communities, especially in Texas, deserve programs and systems rooted in reproductive justice and autonomy. And so, I think that that's why using the reproductive justice framework is so important, because it allows us to look at health through a holistic intersectional lens and acknowledge how factors such as access to healthcare, mental health, safe housing, transportation, food security, how that all contributes to a family's ability to thrive in their communities. And so, it's in something that we also like to tell organizations that are saying, like, well, do y'all do advocacy? Like, what are you all doing to dismantle, the structures that perpetuate oppression, like ICE detention? And that's a great question, because we're constantly asking ourselves that. And it's a question that all immigrant rights organizations should be asking themselves too. And I think that, that's one of the ways, that is one of the reasons why Sueños is Sueños, because we engage in both direct service and advocacy. And we advocate for the end of these unjust, dehumanizing immigration policies, while at the same time demonstrating at the community level what alternatives to this oppressive system look like in our community.
That actually moves perfectly into this discussion of before and after this election, right? We're like hustling for the next 12 days. I definitely want to hear about the stuff y'all are doing leading up to the election. And then we should definitely talk about how we're going to pitch in after it. Like, whatever happens, y'all have plans, y'all have stuff you need help with, y'all have like calls to action, and we want to bring people to your tables. So Amber, can you tell us a little bit more about the phone banks that you're hosting leading up, and who you're calling, what you're telling them about, what you're asking for?
Yeah, so we have a 2-state campaign, Wisconsin and Texas. I'm obviously partial to Texas because I live here, but we're working in a couple of states, and really focusing on states that have populations of Black folks, brown folks, Indigenous folks, but also unfortunately places where we're working year round because of high levels of gun violence, high levels of domestic violence with guns, homicides. And so our work, we decided about a year ago to start really focusing on what would a world look like where not only are we holding elected officials accountable, but we're spending a lot of our time and resources really engaging volunteers that have been directly impacted by gun violence and turning out those and empowering them to turn out voters in their own communities. So we built this kind of voter file model that is where we reach out to volunteers and voters that are all people of color who are living specifically in areas of both those states that either have been shot themselves, they've had a loved one who was shot, maybe and survived, but also are directly impacted by gun violence on a regular basis. And so it's unfortunate that there are so many people who are directly impacted. We're all, 1 second away from being impacted by gun violence. So unfortunately the list is long, but that also means that there's a lot of people who are impacted by an issue that many people are ignoring in our communities. And so we're the only organization in the country that is working on gun violence that is just laser focused on people of color, on Black folks, on Latinx folks, especially here in Texas. And so we're turning out voters, we're using messages, incredible messengers that are from our communities to actually do that. And we're doing phone banks. So we have this really cool, like, auto dialer thing. I don't know anything about technology, but a system where you just pick up the phone and you can call and dial a ton of people. We have a lot of volunteers that will be on the phones with us every single night. They're doing it right now. And then we're also texting people as well. But we're really hoping that actually having that as much as human connection as you can have during the pandemic, being on the phones with people will be really helpful. And so we're going to be calling voters until the polls close El Paso time. And we will probably be calling after that. And I know we'll talk in a second about what happens after the elections, but as you know, a lot of people have said previously, we will leave no voter unturned. I don't care who has to tell me to stop calling them or contacting them. You need to go and vote, and then I will stop contacting you, and I won't lose your number because I'm going to contact you after the elections to stay involved. But we need every single person. This is it. I remember how I felt after 2016. Some people don't have the ability to vote, so we are voting not just for ourselves, but for our communities and for our loved ones, the people who are formerly incarcerated, the people who are incarcerated that should have never been there in the first place, the people who don't have the right to vote, we are voting for them. And so we're just reminding people every single day of how important it is to get our communities out. And again, talking to voters that just nobody is really contacting because they're not the party line voters, or they are the party line voters, but they're people who are disconnected from a lot of the issues that people really are talking about on a daily basis. And so we're excited about that and have phone banks every single night.
For joining. Laura, are you working on any electoral stuff for the next 12 days, or what's going on?
Yeah. So I just want to give reverence to Amber's incredible work doing like the phone banking here in Texas, especially because it's so important. And you know, and I would like to say that we have been you know, doing the same thing, but we, you know, right now are you know, many of the women and families, you know, supported by our collective. I mean, we are, you know, they know what's going on with what's with the election, and you know, and we're trying to, you know, provide education to them and also empowerment too, and really, you know, emphasizing the fact that their voice is the most powerful thing, and that nobody can take that away from them. And so a lot of the women and the families that we work with right now, they have been directly impacted by these cruel xenophobic policies implemented by not just the Trump administration, but multiple administrations over the past decades. And that includes family separation, 575 children still being separated from their families, ICE detention, deportation. And we are seeing how these inhumane policies have manifested in our clients' lives. So many of the women that we work with are grappling with post-traumatic stress, anxiety, depression, and adverse health outcomes since arriving into the US. And so the reproductive and mental health of women is profoundly affected by the current immigration policy. And so, you know, one thing that we're really trying to do right now is, you know, our work is informed by the needs and the voices of the clients that we serve. And so we launched a October fundraiser called Growing Roots, which will assist 4 immigrant women and their families in our caseload with access to safe housing and food security in South Texas. And our goal is to raise $15,000 in 2 weeks. And, you know, these families are in various stages of their immigration cases and have been affected by the cruel and dehumanizing immigration apparatus, ICE, CBP, at the border and in Texas. And they, you know, are ineligible to receive public benefits. There is no safety net there to support them, especially in Texas. And they are also facing compounding effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, you know, that has been our focus is trying to uplift this fundraiser and, you know, really like encourage our followers, advocating for them to vote, but also following it with with that advocacy in their communities. And it's like, how can we continue to live out this this advocacy? And you know, you can do it by you know, helping your community with providing mutual aid.
This is the kind of work that is necessary now, will be necessary if Biden wins, will be necessary if Trump wins. And it helps me zoom out and understand what the real fight is, right? Like, we get wrapped up in elections all the time and we're just like, we got to play this game. We know this game. Let's get the numbers. Let's get, like, turn out the numbers that we need. But then there's the overarching arc of what this story of attaining justice for these impacted communities looks like. And so being able to focus on the care work, being able to focus on the people. I'm talking about zooming in, but also that's an act of zooming out. And so what do we do after the election? You know, like, someone's going to win, but this work remains the same. And the playing field changes a little bit, but the work generally remains the same. What are we doing to support y'all after in 12 days?
So yeah, no, that's a great point, Jessica, and I appreciate you you know, uplifting that, and I also want to point out that structural change, sustainable structural change, occurs when we, you know, not to sound corny or anything, but when we realize our inherent power, and also allow ourselves to experience joy in our communities. I think that is one of the greatest forms of resistance. And also, you know, it's continuing to uplift these stories, these narratives of communities of color, and, you know, identifying and creating mutual aid funds in your own communities. There are so many toolkits that exist that, you know, really, like, can help, you know, someone who's never done it before do it. And it's like the power is truly in our hands when you think about it. And that's a beautiful thing. And so, you know, Sueños is a really small grassroots collective. We are powered by our community. And so any form of you know, social media sharing or uplifting is greatly appreciated. We know that times are really tough right now, and, you know, not everybody is able to you know, donate directly to these families, but you are providing mutual aid by you know, uplifting their narratives and sharing within your community too.
We love storytelling. That's what we're gathering around. We're gathering around the talents of, like, two incredible filmmakers who thought that my story was worth telling. And so being able to tell other people's stories has so much power. Amber, what are we doing after the election? We're following y'all's lead.
Well, we have the Texas legislative session. People can start filing bills on November 7th. So we are away from not only the 2 weeks away from not only the elections, but also some really important bills. We saw what happened when the Texas legislature wasn't in session. There were so many really horrific bills and pieces of legislation that people either hinted that they're going to be filing, or that people have said that they're going to file as soon as bill filing opens up. And so we are both going to be on the defense, and more importantly, we'll be on the offense. We're going to be trying to find champions to make sure that we are supporting and getting funding to the communities to really take a holistic approach to reducing violence and stopping harm in our communities. And so we'll be working with coalitions across the country, but also just here in Texas, to make sure that we're holding people accountable. And so a lot of our work, as soon as the election's over with here in Texas, are going to be focused on the legislature. But as we know, our legislature is only a couple of months. And so we're going to be working in counties. We're working in Travis, Harris, Bear, a couple of other counties across the state, Tarrant, to make sure that we're getting direct funding from city and municipal and county lawmakers as well, to fund the violence prevention work. Gun violence will not stop unless we address it, and address it in a way that actually is culturally competent, and also a way that gives, again, the self-determination back to communities. And so I also just want to, Laura, just thank you for the work that you're doing. We will make a donation of $1,000 to your organization. And I hope that everybody will go and donate all of your money. If you've donated all of your electoral money, go and donate it to Lauda's organizations, because they're doing incredible work. So thank you.
Oh my word.
Well, can I turn my camera off so I can cry? Thank you, Amber, so much. That is incredible, and we sincerely appreciate it, and just honored to be on here with you, and I really look forward to just connecting further and uplifting your work as well, like through our channels and to our community, because it's so important. And I'm just, I have no words. I'm just so grateful.
I know how the early stages are too. I'm only almost 5 years into this, but that two and a half year, and you're just doing incredible work, direct services work people don't support. And so it's incredibly important. And so I really, honestly, if people can do a monthly donation, you should do that. That helps people as well. And so please support women of color in Texas doing the work on the ground. It's really, really important.
That's the theme of it.
Yeah.
That's the theme of it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's I'm sorry. I just, whew. And that is the theme of it, you know, and the importance of remembering our radical roots, right? In our ancestral resilience and the ongoing fight, you know, for our communities, and doing whatever we can and showing up in different ways. And in every way is important. And so all of our work is interconnected, and our, you know, like we said before, our liberation is bound to each other. And that is one of the most important takeaways from all of this, is that no matter what happens, the power of community care is going to see us through, I believe.
Oh, thank you both so much for showing up for this, for each other, for me, for Texas. This work doesn't end, and it's exhausting, and I hope y'all get a good bubble bath in on November 3rd before you pick up the work again right after. We will be sharing links to the phone banks, the fund, y'all's websites, y'all's socials, and pollinating the internet with it as best we can. I think we have one audience question. I feel like this news is extremely fresh about the 545 migrant children who are separated from their parents. So does anyone know of any active stuff that's being done immediately, or are we waiting for marching orders?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I encourage you to tap into Detention Watch Network's resources, and please follow their social media accounts, their Twitter, their Instagram. We are organizational partners with them, and so we uplift a lot of their calls for advocacy. And so they are planning some intentional action around this as it unfolds. And so you can follow them. I can put it in the chat too, I can share, but I encourage you to donate to Detention Watch Network too, because they are doing incredible work across the country, not only in South Texas at the Texas border, but all across the country.
All right. Thank you for giving everyone this glimpse into collective struggle on the way to collective liberation. And thanks for joining me tonight. I think we should sign off and get back to work. Be in touch. Thank you for the audience for joining too, everybody.
Thank you. It was an honor. Thank you, Jessica. It's so wonderful to see you, and I look forward to seeing you in person sometime in the very near future.
ASAP.
Thank you.